Welcome to the TrustLine and Guardian 101 workshop at the 2021 Joint R&R Network CAPPA Conference. My name is Cindy Mall, and I'm the Senior Program Manager at the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network. And I've overseen TrustLine here at the network since 1992. I'm pleased to have two of my colleagues from the California Department of Social Services, or CDSS, joining me today in this presentation. Isadora Medrano and Rebecca Guzman. Isadora is a Guardian expert and will share Guardian information with you, and Rebecca is an expert on the background checks DSS conducts for all of their licensed facilities, TrustLine, and the Home Care Registry. So let's review the agenda for this session. We will provide an overview of TrustLine and talk about the three parts of TrustLine: applying to TrustLine, the processing of the applications and fingerprints, and the results, as well as give you a peek at some changes for TrustLine on the horizon. All right, let's get started. So how did TrustLine begin? Back in the late 1980s, a mom, Mary Beth Phillips, was finishing up a graduate class, and her regular child care provider had gone home for the summer break. So she dropped off her daughter Elizabeth with the neighbor's nanny for the afternoon. When she came back, she found that her daughter had been taken to Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley and was partially paralyzed and in a coma. Elizabeth survived the shaking she'd received at the hands of the nanny and has grown into an amazing woman with a PhD in philosophy and an advocate for children. And she currently works at the San Francisco Public Library, which is just a couple blocks from the network office, and she's doing programs for the blind there. Elizabeth recovered from the paralysis, but was blinded for life by that shaking. Her child care provider was convicted of felony child abuse, but the judge did not want to take away this individual's right to earn a living and allowed her to continue caring for children. And when Mary Beth Phillips heard that, it politicized her. And she worked with two other moms and her local R&R, Bananas, and legislators to get legislation passed that ultimately created the TrustLine Registry. The TrustLine program was a pilot in 5 counties in the 1989 and 90 years. The evaluation of the pilot was positive, and it was just at that time that the evaluation was coming out that the child care and development block grant dollars were being, the legislation was being passed at the federal level under the first George Bush. And this legislation created changes in the subsidy child care program in California, as license-exempt child care had not been a required option at that time. It was only optional. So once the block grant got passed, all states had to offer license-exempt child care as an option for parents. And so we took that as an opportunity to sponsor legislation that required that those individuals being paid by the block grant and alternative payment programs be registered on TrustLine, except for grandparents, aunts, and uncles, in order to get a payment. A couple of years later, legislation was sponsored that required the Title IV-A programs, and some of you may remember the GAIN or transitional child care programs of that era, and they all rolled up into the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families legislation that was passed in 1998 that created our current stages 1, 2, and 3. There were also legislation that we sponsored at the network to require nanny agencies to use TrustLine on their nannies if they're placing. Legislation for transport escort services came around, and that transport escort services are businesses that provide transportation out of state to boot camps for troubled youth. So their drivers have to be registered. Ancillary child care centers are child care centers that businesses provide to guardians or parents while they are shopping or getting a service. So health clubs and gyms are the biggest user of this particular provision. And Rayleigh's, even a Sacramento grocery store, even at least pre-COVID, they were also providing child care while the parents grocery shopped, and they also used TrustLine to register their child care providers. On-call transportation companies came next, and you're all very familiar with Uber. Well, businesses started popping up that were providing transportation for unaccompanied children. So they'll take your 6-year-old, they'll pick them up from school, take them to karate or dance class or baseball practice. So those drivers have to be registered on TrustLine. And this is a unique category of the online transportation companies, because everything else that I'm talking about who are required to use TrustLine are legislated in statute. But the on-call transportation companies, they're not in statute. It's the California Public Utilities Commission that oversees all transportation in the state of California. They require those that transport children without any adult with them to be registered on TrustLine, those drivers. And then we have supervised visitation monitors. That legislation just went into effect this last January, and supervised visitation monitors provide supervision for the non-custodial parent to have a visit with their children, and any of those that are considered professional, they're getting paid for their service, have to be registered on TrustLine. So there's a lot of pieces, a lot of history, behind the TrustLine story, and I think it's important to start there from that story and to understand that as we talk about this childcare protection that we have today and that all of you help administer. So we have state level agencies that are involved with the TrustLine background check. And remember, the TrustLine background check is the exact same background check anyone that works in a licensed childcare facility gets. And so the Department of Justice is involved. They get the fingerprints and basic identifying information about a person, and they send a set of those fingerprints to the FBI for their check, and the Department of Justice conducts 2 checks in California. One is the California Criminal History System, looking for arrests and convictions in the state of California, and the other is the Child Abuse Central Index, nicknamed or acronym is CACI, C-A-C-I, so you'll hear that term in this presentation today. The child abuse check is a name check, where the criminal history system is an FBI check. They gather all the data from those 3 checks and they send it to the Department of Social Services. The Department of Social Services is where the program lives. They have 2 divisions that are involved with TrustLine. One is the Community Care Licensing Division, and they have a special bureau, the Care Provider Management Bureau. It's a relatively new name. They are the ones that do the background checks for all licensed care, TrustLine, and the Home Care Registry. They do all the background checks for community care licensing. And then we have the Child Care and Development Division, which is a new division at the department, and it includes all the child care programs that were at the Department of Education, so alternative payment programs, and on and on. And they all transitioned to the Department of Social Services on July 1st of this year. And in that, besides alternative payment program, the block grant, that's also where stages 1, 2, 3, and the bridge program now reside. Then we get to the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network, and that's my organization, and we are listed in statute with certain statutory responsibilities, and that is pretty unique in the world to have a nonprofit listed in statute with responsibilities. We provide the 800 number for TrustLine that all of you call, and we have staff that speak both English and Spanish ready to answer your calls Monday through Friday between 9 and 5. And we also provide proactive notification of status updates for applicants associated with your agency, and we send those either registered or closed letters out Monday through Friday. We provide training and technical assistance on TrustLine and the Guardian system, and we also facilitate the live scan in the state of California and work with you and live scan vendors to make sure that system is all working as best as possible for applicants. So we'll move on now to the next slide. This is perfect. And we'll talk about the first part of TrustLine, and one that the overall application process, and what are the ABCs of the application process. And so when we think about this, we think about the 2 sides of TrustLine, and I've kind of mentioned those. I mean, you have the subsidized side of TrustLine that all of you are very familiar with, and we have the fee-paying side of TrustLine, and that's where we find the nanny agencies and transport escort services. On the subsidized side, the DOJ and the Department of Social Services fees are paid for at the state level out of those pots of money, whether it's block grant or stage 1 or bridge. The only fee that's not paid in the subsidized program is actually the rolling fee that goes to the live scan vendor. And you can, local R&R payment programs can get reimbursed for those fees up to $25 if you want to pay the fee directly to the vendor or reimburse the applicant. and then you can request reimbursement from the network, from my organization, and we will reimburse you up to $25. If you are not already taking advantage of this, you can contact me, and my information will be on the last slide of this presentation, and we can set you up to so that you can invoice us for those payments. Then we have the fee paying side of TrustLine, and that is all the nanny agencies and transportation companies, etc. And they do need to pay the Department of Justice fee of $64, and they pay the Department of Social Services either $43 or $78, depending on what program they're in and how the legislation was written for them. So again, we have the three parts of TrustLine: applying to TrustLine, the processing that happens, and then results. And the applying is where you're involved, and local agencies provide the application. You provide technical assistance on how to complete the application. You provide information about where to go get fingerprinted, where the live scan sites that they can go to, and then you accept the application. The resource and referrals responsibility are those things, except we know that in some local areas it makes more sense for the AP to be involved in certain of those responsibilities, and it's really for the local agency or agencies to figure out how that system will work best in the local area. But one of those agencies is responsible for, and typically it's the resource and referral program, for submitting the application either on Guardian, so you're going to have someone in your agency entering the application onto Guardian, or you're going to be sending that paper application to the Department of Social Services to be entered onto Guardian. Then the processing happens, at the Department of Justice that I talked about, and at the Department of Social Services. And the Department of Social Services not only accepts the application and or processes the application, but they also check the licensing records to make sure this individual has not been revoked or denied a child care license and has not been excluded from working in a licensed facility. So there's one additional check that's being done besides what's being done at the Department of Justice. So once all those pieces of information come together, then the Department of Social Services makes a decision about the status of an applicant. And then those results get sent out. And so the Department of Social Services communicates directly with the applicant. And the applicant, as long as they have an email address, and you need an email address in order to submit the application onto Guardian. But they also need an email address if they want to sign on and create their own portal onto the Guardian system. If the applicant creates their own portal, they don't submit the application, you all do, the agency does, but they can go on and create their own portal there so that they can communicate directly with the Department of Social Services electronically. So if they do have to submit criminal history information, their letters of recommendation or other documents that are required by the department, if they have something in their background, they can do that electronically if they set up their portal. Otherwise, the department will communicate with applicants through the U.S. mail. There are other results that are sent to the agencies or sent by us, like I mentioned before, and we communicate results to the R&R and payment programs and county wealth departments and all the agencies associated with TrustLine. So, like I said, we have a Guardian process and a paper application process, and either are available to all of you. Certainly, the Guardian process is the preferred process, but we will always have a paper application process for a variety of reasons, so that there's always access to everyone, no matter how the application is most easily submitted. Next, let's talk about the application a little bit. So TrustLine used to have 3 different applications. They had one for subsidy and then 2 for the fee-paying applications. But now we have just one. It's a TLR 9163G for Guardian. And I want to talk to you about 4 main areas of tips or information that I really would like you to have in mind when you're working in the TrustLine program. And one is there's only 4 acceptable IDs for TrustLine. The acceptable IDs include the California driver's license, the California ID card, and out-of-state photo ID or driver's license from another state, or the permanent resident card. No other IDs are acceptable. So a military ID is not acceptable. Student IDs are not acceptable. And that's listed in statute. Next, the person does have to be 18 years of age or older to apply. The signature and date, which we'll go over in a minute once we finish the first side of the application, but the signature and date of the application is really important, that the applicant sign and date the application. And if you're entering the application onto Guardian, it's really important that you get the completed application form and scan it in so you have it ready to upload onto the Guardian system while you're doing the data entry. So as we look at the first page of the TLR 9163G form, you'll see at the top there are first three fields, 1, 2, and 3 are all pre-printed. I just want to point out the ORI number. Prior to this application that we released in January of this year, the ORI code for TrustLine was A1157. We had our own ORI code, but that was streamlined with Guardian and the new application to the licensing ORI code of A0448. Those other applications sometimes pop up in the field. They've been around for a long time. And so if you hear of an applicant saying, yeah, I had my TrustLine application and I went to get it fingerprinted, and they said they can't do it, it doesn't exist. And check to see if, in fact, they have an older application and make sure they have a current TrustLine application with the correct ORI code. Now, if we go to box 4, that's where the applicant puts all their information. And it's important, if they have an email address, to include that at the bottom of the right kind of column. There's one field that's really important for you all to complete, and it's the miscellaneous billing number. It's on the right-hand column kind of side of box 4, and it's right under the CDL number. So the CDL number is for the California driver's license or ID number. Then we have the miscellaneous billing number, and then under that we have miscellaneous billing number that lists under it alien registration, out-of-state photo ID. And so that's where the permanent resident card would go, or a out-of-state photo ID. So the miscellaneous billing number is for subsidized applicants must be completed in order for the live scan vendor not to charge the applicant the $64 TrustLine fee. And so the number that needs to go on the miscellaneous billing number line there is 100126. And your applications probably already have that entered in there, but just to make a special note of that number, so it's 100-126, and it goes on that miscellaneous billing number line when it says agency billing number, if applicable. And it is applicable for all subsidized. We can't have it pre-printed on all the forms online, because we don't want all the fee-paying folks to get TrustLine for free, and so or paid for by one of the subsidy programs, basically. So that's really important to put that number in. The agency number is the next important thing in box number 5. That is your code, your TLR, TrustLine number that we gave you to associate your number, your agency, to the applicant. And so make sure that is completed. And right under that is the agency information about your agency, so your agency name, etc. And then we want you to mark the subsidy program that this applicant is associated to, because that's how their application is paid for, through the different pots of money. So if it's stage 1, then stage 1 will pay for this TrustLine application cost. And for county welfare departments, they need case numbers to track their families and associate the applicant with the family that's using that caregiver. So a case number, if applicable, for the county, and if the APs use one, that's fine. Then the live scan vendor completes their portion of it and signs off on the fingerprinting. And then the side 2 of the application is where we have, well, first we say the transfer process. We're going to talk about the transfer process a little bit later, so I'm going to skip over that at this time. And we go to box 8 is the criminal record statement. And the applicant needs to mark the boxes there. There are 3 questions that they need to consider. And the last one is, have you lived in a state other than California within the last 5 years? And if they have, It says list each state, which they need to do, but on Guardian, it also wants the dates they were in each state, and that is not on this application form. So if you want to make a note of that and put that on your form, that would be very helpful. We will be doing some updates of the TLR 9163G form coming in 2022, and we're hoping to add that information to the form at that time. We have a health and safety opt-out. We've always wanted to provide health and safety and child development information to new TrustLine registered individuals. And so we're hoping in 2022 we can roll that out and start do an email for the first kind of year that the person's on TrustLine and give them information that might help them in providing safe quality childcare and get them connected to their local resource and referral program ongoing. Some demographic information here is where they need to sign and date it. So on box 11, they sign and date it. And the critical part about this and why you need to scan it is into the system, into Guardian, is that you can't sign off on someone else's criminal record statement. And so the department needs to see this side of the application with the applicant marking boxes in box 8 and signing off on that. And then in box 12, for the subsidized applicants, you'll mark the subsidized box. And then in box 13 is where the second agency that's associated with this applicant, if there is one, that's where they go. And so if your agency does both the R&R and payment program, then all you need to do is fill out boxes 5 and 6 on the front. But if you, let's say you're Crystal Stairs R&R in Los Angeles, and you are helping process a TrustLine application for Drew Alternative Payment Program, which is an agency separate from yours, Crystal Stairs can put their information on the front, and then Drew's information will go back here. So the name of the agency, Drew, and then their agency TLR number would be listed here as well. Once you do that, then both Drew and Crystal Stairs will be associated with this applicant, and they will appear on each of your rosters when you go into Guardian, and we will proactively send you letters, both agencies' letters, about the status of applicants. All right. So now I would like to turn over the presentation to Yasaida, who's going to talk to you about the Guardian system. Yasaida?
Perfect. Thank you, Cindy. Hello, my name is Yasaida Medrano. As Cindy had mentioned, I am an analyst with the Department of Social Services, and I'm here today to present some information on Guardian. And I also have Rebecca Guzman with me, who will be presenting a little bit more on the background check process a little bit later. So I've provided an agenda of some of the Guardian topics we will be covering today. We're first going to have a little bit of an introduction and an overview of Guardian and some of the features it offers. We will then dive into the application submission process, and we will explore both when fingerprints are submitted first in Guardian and when an application is submitted first, and what both of those processes look like. We'll then explore transferring a provider to TrustLine, and we will kind of visit a couple different routes there. And then we will discuss program changes and how to submit a change of address. So Guardian went live January 15th, 2021, and it is the tool to help ensure background checks are completed faster and more efficiently. Guardian itself is a secured web-based system which contains different portals for different user groups. So as Cindy had kind of touched over earlier, providers can have access to a portal, agencies, and then as well as CDSS staff and licensing agencies. And with utilizing Guardian, agencies have the ability to manage the list of applicants that are associated to your agency, which is a roster. Paperless communication is also an option, which just allows you to be notified when a background check decision is made on a provider. And then, again, this is done in real time. And agencies also have the ability to upload documents as well directly into the Guardian database. And then just to kind of retouch on this, providers also have the ability to sign up for their own portal. And this just allows them to be able to communicate with the Department of Social Services and upload any background check documents as needed. So we're going to begin discussing what the application process looks like when a provider is fingerprinted before submitting any applications in Guardian. I will be providing a little bit of a demonstration video on how this process will be completed, but I want to bring your attention to a few key items before we begin. So on this slide here, I've numbered 3 items, and I just kind of want you to look at number 1 for now. For an application in which fingerprints are submitted first, Guardian creates an entry which is similar to this screenshot we have here. You'll notice box number 1 is highlighting what's called a TCN, which serves as a fingerprint tracking number. It's an easy way to ensure that fingerprints are tied to a background check. And then again, this number is used to track fingerprints. Looking at number 2, again, when fingerprints are submitted first, Guardian will create a submitted application for the TrustLine registry for the applicant. And the Guardian's just essentially doing a lot of the legwork for you in the beginning. And then looking at item number 3 here, the application will also create the application with a TrustLine initial registry request type that's associated to it. And these request types you'll see later on in the presentation are very important when associating someone to the registry and associating them to an agency and doing program changes and so forth. So now with fingerprint initiated applications, as I stated, Guardian will do a lot of the legwork for you. Guardian will create a provider's profile if they do not currently have one. It will create that initial application, but an additional application is going to be needed to capture the agency payment program and case number information as applicable. It's extremely important to remember to complete the second application in the system because a provider's registry status will not be updated without it. So if a provider gets fingerprinted first and they clear, but the agency never went back and added the second subsidized application, their registry status will remain pending. So again, I just want to stress the importance of ensuring there's initial application and there is a second subsidized. And we'll show screenshots and videos exactly what this looks like. So as mentioned, we have a short demonstration video to show you how to complete that second application in Guardian when fingerprints initiate the initial application.
As demonstrated in the previous slides, the first step is going to be to select Add New Application in the top right corner. This will begin to walk you through the application steps. You may see this message here, which is just informing you are adding a new application to a background check determination which is already in process. This would be the initial application which was initiated by the fingerprints. You can select Yes to continue. This page is called the Personal Demographic Information page. Here you can review and confirm personal demographic information for the provider. If no changes need to be made here, you may continue to the next page. It is, however, important to note if the applicant does not have an email address on file, you will need to either enter it if you know it or enter unknown@unknown.com to bypass the requirement. Next, you will be brought to the pre-association information page. On this page, you can enter the agency and payment program information. So the first step here is going to be to select the appropriate agency from the agency dropdown. The request type you want to select at this point is the TrustLine subsidized option, because again, the applicant already has an initial application submitted. You will notice the related TrustLine agency box will populate, and here is where you can enter in the payment program for the provider. Here you will need to know the exact TLR number for the payment program and enter it verbatim. You'll notice after you enter in the TLR number, the agency's name will populate. The program and position categories will auto-populate. And from the position drop-down, you will be able to select the applicable stage option. The case number field will also populate to then enter the associated case number if applicable. You'll then be brought to the Verify Identity page where you can enter one of the 4 TrustLine approved identity documents. Next, you will be brought to the Research Registries page, and the main purpose of this page is to confirm the correct request type was selected. A not matched response indicates you can continue in the process. The next page will reflect a payment is not required for this application. And the final step before submitting the application is the Data Review page. Ensure all information is correct and you may submit the application. You should receive the application submitted confirmation message.
All right, and I just want to quickly reiterate a couple items. The second box on the pre-association page, which will populate, only needs to be entered on an as-needed basis. And you'll see those same pop-up message boxes throughout the rest of the presentation videos as well. Okay, so we're going to switch gears just a little bit here, and now we're going to begin covering what the application process looks like when you go into Guardian and begin the application first. So this is before the fingerprints are submitted. So I've outlined a couple of key steps to begin this process. And the first step is going to be to conduct what's called a person search in Guardian. And this is just to ensure that the applicant doesn't already exist, just to prevent creating duplicate profiles in the system. Number 2 here shows that if the applicant does not exist, you will be able to create a profile for the provider by selecting the Add New Applicant button, and then you'll be able to begin walking through the application process. And we will have a video demonstration on what this process will look like shortly. Now, the third item here is if the applicant does exist in the database, you will be automatically routed to their person summary page, which is their profile, and they may be eligible for a transfer, which again, we will get more into a little bit later in the presentation. So as mentioned, we have a short demonstration on how to add an applicant into the database when they do not exist, and then walking through the initial application process.
As stated, you will first conduct a search of the database. This ensures you do not create duplicate profiles or identification numbers in Guardian. At this point in the process, you should have the provider's completed TLR 9163G TrustLine application form filled out, as all of the provider's demographic information and identity document information will be needed to input into the database. Again, you will use the provider's completed TLR 9163G application form to complete all of the required fields. Again, you will need to enter the applicant's email address if known. If not, you may enter unknown@unknown.com to bypass the requirement. If the applicant provides any additional aliases or prior addresses that fit these requirements, you may add them here. If the applicant does not, you may select the not applicable boxes and continue. Now we will begin adding the initial TrustLine application information. Select the applicable agency from the dropdown. The request type to select is the TrustLine Initial Registry option. Program and position category will auto-populate. From the position dropdown, you may select TrustLine Registry and continue. You should now be at the Verify Identity page where you will enter one of the 4 TrustLine approved identity documents. The Research Registries page will confirm you selected the correct request type. If you received a not matched response, you may continue. The payment page should reflect a payment is not required. Next, you may review all data and select Submit. On the confirmation page, you will notice there is a CDSS live scan form. Selecting this link will populate the live scan form, which may be printed and taken to live scan services. Guardian will also populate the date the fingerprints must be submitted. Now, we aren't quite finished, as we will need to add the second application. The quickest way to return to the provider's person summary page is to copy the application number populated at the top of the page and conduct an application search. You will then be routed back to the provider's person summary page where you can select Add New Application. You will then complete the application screens, adding the applicable agency, payment program, and case number as applicable. Once you submit the application, you will receive the application submitted confirmation message, which reiterates the date the fingerprints must be submitted. If you return to the provider's person summary page and view the applications associated to the provider, you will notice that the application should reflect, as well as the applicable stage and case number. The applicant's background check determination status will remain in process until fingerprints are submitted and all responses are received.
Okay, so now we are going to begin discussing transfers and what these may look like in Guardian. So individuals are eligible to transfer to TrustLine if they have worked in a child care facility and have a valid clearance that is still active or has been associated within the past 3 years. The applicant will need to complete the TLR 9163G application form and submit it to the R&R or payment program, who can then enter the application in Guardian. So once the application is submitted, Guardian will actually let the agency know whether the applicant or provider is eligible for a transfer or is required to submit new fingerprints. So we will provide 2 small video clips walking through each of these scenarios, one where the provider is eligible to transfer and one where they are not, and a live scan form generates. If the agency does not want to walk through the application process to determine eligibility, there is the option to contact the Department of Social Services customer service via phone. We've listed the number here. It is the 888-422-5669 phone number, And you can contact DSS between the hours of 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. So as promised, we will be providing 2 short demonstration videos. The first one we are covering is going to show transfer for someone who is eligible to transfer to TrustLine.
The first example we will demonstrate is transferring a provider who has a valid clearance with the child care agency and is eligible to transfer to TrustLine. The first step is to conduct a person search of Guardian to locate the provider. You should have the applicant's completed TLR 9163G application form and utilize the identifying information on the form to search. You will be routed to the provider's person summary page. The next steps are the same steps shown in the previous video clips. You will need to add a new application and begin adding the initial application for the TrustLine registry. Ensure you select the TrustLine initial registry request type. You will need to enter one of the 4 TrustLine approved forms of identification. Again, the Research Registries page confirms the correct request type was selected. You will notice once you submit the application, Guardian will display a message indicating the applicant is eligible for employment and does not require fingerprinting.
So again, just keep in mind you will need to return to the provider's person summary page to add that second application. And then after completing the transfer, you always want to ensure to upload the application as well. So now we're going to dive into the other side of this, transferring an applicant or a provider to TrustLine who's not necessarily eligible for a straight transfer.
The next example we will demonstrate is entering an application for a provider who's not eligible for a transfer. This individual may have a clearance for an adult and senior care agency or home care, but is still required to get fingerprinted again to fulfill the Khaki or child abuse check for TrustLine. The first step is to conduct a person search of Guardian. You will be routed to the provider's person summary page. Again, the steps here are the same steps as shown in the previous video clips. You will need to add a new application and begin adding the initial application for the TrustLine registry. You will notice upon submittal of the application, you will see a message indicating fingerprints are required, as well as the deadline the provider has to submit the fingerprints. The CDSS LiveScan form will also be generated to be printed and for the provider to obtain LiveScan services.
And again, it is important to go back, add that second subsidized application, and upload the application as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cindy to talk about program changes just a little bit.
Thank you, Sada. So program changes, it's really important to make sure that your agency is associated with the applicant that you're paying. So specifically for alternative payment programs and county welfare departments, if the person has been already registered on TrustLine or is a current applicant to TrustLine, and you're going to be paying them now, it's really important to associate your agency code. And for county welfare departments, it's also important to update the case number. So let's say the county welfare department is still paying the same applicant, but they're caring for a different family. It's important to associate that family's case number with that particular child care provider on TrustLine, so that if something happens, let's say 6 months down the road, and this person is disqualified, then we need to contact everyone associated with this applicant, an individual, so that the person is no longer caring for children. So you basically have two options. We do have a form, the TrustLine Payment Program Change Form. You can complete that form and send it to the network office, or R&Rs and APs and county welfare departments can add a new application with your agency information onto Guardian. And so the applicant would complete the TLR 9163G form, and you would go ahead and enter that onto the Guardian system. And I will pop it back over to you, Saida.
Perfect. And just to give a little bit of a visual of that, of what it looks like in Guardian, I provided a screenshot here. The process is very similar to adding the second application, which has been demonstrated throughout this PowerPoint or this presentation. The first step is just locating the applicant in Guardian. You will need to select that Add New Application option in the top right corner of their person summary page, which is their profile. And then when you get to the pre-association page, that's what we have a screenshot provided here of. You will select, again, the appropriate agency from the dropdown, but the request type option is the most important part. That's where you'll select the TrustLine subsidized option. And so once the request type is selected, the box to enter the specific TLR associated agency box will populate. And again, this is only on an as needed basis. Program and position category will auto populate, and then you will just select the applicable option from the position drop down and enter a case number as well, if applicable. And then you can continue to walk through the application process. These screens should look familiar. You should receive that not matched response. If you mistakenly select an initial TrustLine registry request type, you will get a matched response, which just indicates that an error was caused, and it won't let you move forward. But once you are complete with that, once you submit it, you should get the application submitted confirmation message, which just lets you know everything was completed. At this time, I will go ahead and give it right back to Cindy to discuss address changes.
Thank you. So the other thing that needs to remain current, besides the agency associated with the applicant, is the applicant's address itself. Their current home address should be always updated. And I'm sure applicants, when they think about when they move, that they're updating maybe their bank account and their utilities bills. But to think about doing it on TrustLine, we understand how that can get missed, but it is part of the statute. And in order to change someone's address on Guardian, the applicant can go on to their Guardian profile if they've created one and change their address. The agency, all of you, can go on and change one of your child care providers associated with you on TrustLine. You can change their address, or the change of address information can be provided in writing. It has to be in writing per statute, not via phone. And you can use the form that we've created, or it could be in an email with basically the same information of the person's name, driver's license, and what their new address is. If the agency, if you all submit this form, this paper form, to the Department of Social Services, the applicant's photo ID is not required because they are relying on you confirming that person's identity. But if the applicant submits this form directly, then the applicant must provide a copy of their photo ID that contains their current address along with the form. So we can go on to the next screen. And I think now it's time to turn it over to Rebecca, who will talk to you about background checks.
Thank you, Cindy. Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Guzman, and I am one of the 3 liaison analysts here at the Care Provider Management Bureau. And I'd like to talk to you a little about the background check process. And we have a slide with the agenda so you know what is coming up. So we're going to talk about why fingerprint, the fingerprint submission, live scanning to CPMB, RAP received, the exemption process, the arrest only process, and also the Khaki process. Next slide, please. Thank you. So first of all, why fingerprint? Per Health and Safety Code 1596.603, persons must submit fingerprints and a completed TrustLine application. Also per Health and Safety Code 1596.607A1, if the TrustLine applicant has been convicted of a crime, the department shall deny the application unless an exemption is granted. And I will talk about the exemption process in the upcoming slides. Process applications and background checks for CDSS and CDE subsidized programs, ancillary daycare programs, foster care mentors, volunteers, child visitation monitors, and bridge program applicants. That's what we process here. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the fingerprint submission. So each TrustLine applicant must submit fingerprints to the California Department of Justice, the DOJ, via live scan form. The DOJ checks for in-state arrest and conviction information. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the FBI, checks for out-of-state arrest and conviction information. And finally, the Child Abuse Central Index, CACI. CACI is a name-based search of child abuse investigation reports. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here is the process, what happens after you live scan and how it comes to CPMB. So once the TrustLine applicant fingerprints, the results arrive as CPMB in the Guardian system. Guardian does an RS check before the results are even viewed. And Cindy touched upon this a little bit in the beginning. This is a separate check that happens before we even receive information. So R stands for Administrative Action Record System. An administrative action is a negative action which results in the exclusion of the applicant to work, reside, or be present in a community care license agency. So if the applicant is cleared through R's, there are 3 results that can happen. 1 is cleared, meaning there's no record with DOJ, FBI, or CACI, so the applicant is now registered on TrustLine. Another outcome is error batch. This means that the fingerprints and results arrive to CPMB with wrong information and the fingerprint result is stuck. Oftentimes, a mistake was put on a live scan form or the fingerprint operator made an error when entering in the information from the live scan. And this will cause the applicant to show up in Guardian as pending until someone, either the applicant or the agency, follows up on the results. So if you happen to see a pending status, please contact the Resource and Referral Network at their toll-free 1-800 number, and they will assist you. Another outcome is the RAP received. RAP stands for Record of Arrests and Prosecutions. This is a result category that we will discuss further in the next slide. So when a RAP is received, we review it, and depending on what information is on the RAP, will tell us what the next step will be. So if the RAP sheet has arrest and convictions on it, the applicant will need an exemption. If the RAP sheet only has arrest with no convictions, this may become an arrest-only case. And if the RAP contains a possible CACI match, then it will go through the CACI investigative process. And I will walk through each of these outcomes in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first outcome I'm going to talk about is the exemption needed process. So an exemption is needed because there are arrests and convictions on the applicant's RAP sheet. An analyst will send the immediate action required letter to the applicant. This letter lists the documents that need to be submitted to CPMB within 45 days. These three documents are number one, a written statement, which is an explanation about the events leading up to the arrest that resulted in the conviction. Number two, verification. So this can be anything from proof of training, classes, courses, treatment, counseling, or anything else that the applicant has completed. And finally, the third document we need is 3 character references. They have to be on the LIC 301E form. They must be current and they cannot be from relatives, and they also cannot be from someone who works at the agency. So the exemption then must be requested. So we need to receive a response from the applicant in order to continue the process. So when the required documents are received from the applicant, CPMB orders arrest reports and possibly court documents from outside agencies. Now, this is an area that takes up a lot of time because we cannot move to the next step until we have a report for each conviction or a statement that the report has been purged. So once we receive all the documents, it is reviewed by an analyst and a decision is made to either approve the exemption or to deny the exemption. Next slide, please. Okay, so you may be wondering what we look at in order to make our decision. So here are some criteria that analysts consider. The first one is the type of crime. So was the crime against property? Was the crime against a person? Like was it an assault and battery? What is the characteristic of that person? Was it a vulnerable individual such as a child, elderly or disabled person? We're also looking at, was the crime victimless, such as driving without a license? And finally, is there a pattern of behavior, meaning there are 3 or more convictions for the same or similar crimes, such as a DUI. So if a person has a DUI in 2012, and then there's a second one in 2015, and then there's a third one in 2020, that is a pattern, and we take a closer look at those. So, and I also like to mention that we look at the applicant's entire criminal history. So from the time they turn 18 is where we start looking at all of the conviction information. Another criteria is the length of time since the conviction. So how long has it been since the most recent conviction? And is that recent conviction a misdemeanor or felony? And is it violent? So all exemptions for violent crimes must have approval from a manager, from our legal division, and also from our bureau chief. So those types of exemptions take a little bit more time because we need all those signatures in order to approve someone with a violent crime. Another criteria is evidence of rehabilitation. So this means, what has the individual done since the conviction? Have they participated or completed court-ordered classes? Have they pursued or completed education? Do they successfully complete probation or parole? So we're looking at those. Another one is honesty. So does the written statement that they wrote is described the same way as the arrest report narrative? Is there any sense of accepting responsibility? Do they show remorse? So we look at those. And another one is the client agency type. What is the role and responsibility of the applicant? So who is the applicant going to work for? And the potential opportunity to harm clients. And finally, the last criteria is the risk of harm to clients. So does the applicant pose a risk to the health and welfare of the children or child? This is a decision that we don't take lightly, and our analysts make these tough decisions and to keep our state's most vulnerable, the children, safe. Next slide, please. All right, so now that you have understanding of the criteria that we look at, let's go through the exemption denial process. So besides being denied for not meeting the criteria, the TrustLine applicant can be denied for not responding to the exemption needed letter and or not responding to the request for additional information letter. The request for additional information letter is a letter that gets generated to the applicant telling them that CPMB needs more information. This could be a more detailed written statement or character references, just to name a few examples. I would also like to emphasize that the applicant needs to address every conviction in the written statement. Even if the conviction occurred a long time ago and the applicant does not remember what happened or any details, the applicant can write down something simple such as, I don't remember what happened. We just need to know and see that the applicant has addressed that conviction. So when a TrustLine applicant is denied, CPMB sends a notification of the denial to the applicant. Regardless if the applicant appeals the denial or not, we will prepare a statement of facts, also known as a SOF, order the arrest reports, and court documents. After the requests are made, the case is timed out for 30 days, which allows us to receive the requested information. After 30 days, the file is forwarded to our legal division for further processing. And once this case goes to legal, it is out of our hands. Legal takes over, and at this point, any questions the applicant may have regarding their case status should be followed up with our legal division. Okay, next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk about non-exemptable convictions. Statute prohibits the department from granting an exemption for certain specified crimes. There are 60 non-exemptable crimes listed in the Evaluator's Manual, that's section 7-2100. A RAP with a non-exemptable conviction is given first priority, which means an analyst has 24 hours to process this type of case. Some examples of non-exemptable crimes are murder, torture, rape, kidnapping, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So the next process I'm going to talk about is the arrest-only case process. So an arrest-only case originates from a RAP indicating a referable arrest that did not result in a conviction. So arrest-only investigation is conducted for all non-exemptable and a list of referable crimes. The process is completed by CPMB staff, our investigations branch, and legal. The arrest-only committee determines if the conduct is substantiated to an administrative standard in order to take action against the individual's registry status. Next slide, please. And finally, the last process is a Khaki process. A child abuse index check, also known as Khaki, must be completed prior to granting a clearance or exemption in order to be placed on the TrustLine registry. The CPMB receives responses to the Khaki check stating if it's either clear or if there's a possible match. So when we have a Khaki possible match, we will obtain a copy of the report from the Child Welfare Services Case Management System, also known as CWS-CMS, and then that is forwarded to an analyst for an evaluation. And after the evaluation, if the report was thorough and there's no risk found, the Khaki possible match may be cleared by CPMB. If we need more information to assess the risk, it will be referred out for our investigation to our investigations branch, IB. CPMB will then be informed of the findings once the investigation branch completes its investigation. Next slide, please. And here's just something else to look out for. It has happened, mistaken identity. So this happens if the RAP contains incorrect information, and we ask that the individual contact the Department of Justice Records Department at that phone number, the 916-227-3849. It's important that the applicant contact them because we at the department cannot move forward or process a case until this is taken care of. So even if someone says, I don't have a felony, but it's showing up on my record, can't you just, continue on? We can't. We go by the information that is on the RAP. So it is important that the applicant contact DOJ to get that cleared up. Next slide, please. And here is just our background check information website. This link will take you to our division page. And when you get to the link on the right-hand side of the page under quick links, you can find information about our background check process that I covered, fingerprinting, as well as the full list of non-exemptable crimes. Next slide, please. And finally, here is just our contact information. That's our 1-888 number, our mailing address there, and our customer service email, which is guardian@dss.ca.gov. So hopefully this information was helpful for you to understand how we make decisions here at Care Provider Management Bureau. And now I will turn the presentation back over to Cindy.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. That was very helpful. All right, so TrustLine results. We've come through the application process, the processing that DOJ and DSS do, and now we're to the results for TrustLine that Rebecca was talking about. And the applicant status is basically registered, pending, or closed, and there's reasons for closure, and one of those would be a disqualification for some criminal history. But what I want to really point out to you right now is that on the Guardian system is there are two terms that we want to make sure that everyone's very clear about, and one is the term eligible and one is the term registered. They do not equal each other. Eligible, you'll see a lot on the Guardian database, and you have access to that status. It'll say eligible. Eligible does not mean the person's registered. It only means that they've cleared the background check pieces from the Department of Justice. They does not mean that necessarily they have an application to TrustLine submitted, a completed application, and or that DSS has done their background check of the child care licensing records. And so that because you don't have access to that, that's really important for you to know about, and that's something that is on the horizon that I'll talk about in a minute, is getting all of you access to that via Guardian. So right now, that's why you need to wait to get a letter from us and or call us to confirm a registered status. So the Department of Social Services, again, they notify the applicant, they provide information to the network office. We have continual access to Guardian and information from the department via an API. The network then sends letters out to you, like I've talked about, to all of you for registered and closed statuses, and then we have the 800 number. And of course, the role of local agencies certainly is letting the families know when a person is registered and payment can begin, and or when someone is not registered and they are not able to be paid through the subsidized program. And so lastly, on the horizon, I wanted just to talk about, I mentioned that the TLR 9163G application form is being revised, and you can look for that in 2022, which I can't believe is just around the corner. And then the change that I was talking about is coming to Guardian. One of the network's priorities is that local agencies, there'll be a banner, kind of when you look up someone, it'll be a banner toward the top of the left side of the screen. It'll tell you if the person is indeed registered or not. That's the first change. And then the next change we want is to also give you the date of registration, hopefully in that banner as well, so that you'll have information that you need to start payment right off of Guardian. And that's it's really a high priority for us because we feel that's the most efficient way for all of you to use the system. So then you won't need to wait for us to send a letter to you, and you don't need to call us anymore to find out if the person is registered on TrustLine. So that's, we're hoping that's coming to you in 2022, and then the TrustLine website will be revised. It's very outdated and antiquated, and there will be the information will be updated, a new design, and it will become ADA compliant. So with that, I would like to thank Yazaida and Rebecca for joining me today, and I would like to thank all of you for participating in the TrustLine and Guardian workshop at the 2021 virtual conference. If you have questions that were not answered during this session, or you thought of additional ones because of this session, please contact me at 415-494-4642, or at my email at the network office, or certainly at our 800 number. And we do hope to see you, I hope, in person at the 2022 conference, because I miss seeing everyone in person, though virtual is certainly convenient. Please stay healthy this year. Take care and be well.